Well, good evening, everybody. As I, Nick, Pennsylvania, here as I always am with my good friend Brendan Bond. How are you doing this evening, Brendan?
I'm doing fantastic, bud. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. We were talking last time about the weather yo-yoing. Right now, the weather station in my yard says it is 54.8 degrees Fahrenheit. It
Ooh,
was as high as 64.4 earlier this afternoon, and what a warm day for a warm welcome to our friend Chris, who's back with us a second time. How are you doing this evening, Chris?
I'm wonderful. How are you guys?
Not too bad. You
doing
get out
good.
and enjoy any of that unseasonably warm weather because I think it's supposed to drop down to 20 tonight. Highs and lows and just everywhere in between. But we've got a lot of things on the table. We had a really big episode with our friend Brendan,
hmm
not Brendan Bond, but our friend Brendan M, about the B-25 bomber, and I have gone like the last 3 days saying the B-52 bomber, which is quite wrong. But before we get to that, I did want to say the exciting conclusion of My Being an Idiot, the Cats, the musical too.
Yes, yes, yes.
So for those of you that weren't there at the time, basically the cat's got buttons that say things. It's very adorable when it asks for treats, treats. But it was in the basement eating, and I'm in the room with the buttons, and I hear the cat saying its name, not the cat, but the button.
Right.
And I was spooked out because
hmm
I can see the buttons. I'm not standing on one. I don't think there's any buttons downstairs. So even as I walk out quickly, not I'm still walking, but power walking my way
Right.
out.
Yeah. It's a purposeful walk.
Yes, a purposeful walk to the front door. I'm saying you're an idiot. There's a perfectly good reason for this. Well, I did tell Ben and Katie, and of course they listened to the episode as well because their cat
hmm
got on, and that's very exciting for anybody, really.
Right.
But
Right.
they said, well, we looked at our Ring doorbell and we figured, oh, you left at 5. That's when the automatic feeder goes off. And when the automatic
Mm.
feeder goes off, it says, hey, hey, food time. Hey, hey, food time. But I'll tell you this, that's kind of what we all figured. But I heard, hey, 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 hey. So unless it was, hey, hey, food time. Hey, hey.
Hey.
Like, but just the same. I am an idiot and we didn't need the confirmation, but we have it, and for that we are thankful.
We are thankful.
So,
Well, it's like, but man, though, it's one of those things like in the moment, like that is a forgivable thing to get freaked out by because it's not like I've never heard of a feeder that has a vocal like component to it. I'm not shocked to hear that it exists,
I,
obviously.
I mean, it's just,
because of course cats aren't really super well known to come when they're called, other than the universal cat
Right.
call of pss, 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 pss,
Right,
pss.
right.
What were
it's
you gonna
just
say,
about
Chris?
200% more cat-related automation than I'm prepared for. I think, I think that's the big thing is I'm just not used to there being cat-based automation.
Right. Because one of the benefits of a cat is its lack of a need for automation to keep it
Yes.
domesticated. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point, Chris. That's a very well
I
put.
mean, years ago, I had a friend who was finishing his mechanical engineering degree, and he had to build something, and he made a automated cat feeder. And this is before that was a normal thing that people did. And I mean, I think his was made out of mostly like industrial automation equipment. So it was very loud and very crass compared to what they have now.
Definitely would be very good at scaring cats away from
I was going to say,
speakers.
it sounds great if you're trying to put your cat on a diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, apparently Hey Hey is also a little scared of the food thing, and I was told that so I wouldn't feel so bad for running away
Right. You
from the
and hey,
automatic feeder
hey.
because the cat does
Yeah.
the same thing
Right.
apparently.
At
My
least you and
cat,
the cat have that in common.
comment,
That's
right.
true.
One of many things. Well, it's funny with my cat, she has a habit of going over to I think it's because like the timing. She'll go over to the feeder and start eating at like if the automatic feeder is at like 6, she'll go over and start eating at like 5:59 and 45 seconds. So she'll start like eating and then the automatic feeder part goes off and she does that cute like jump 6 inches straight up kind of thing that cats do.
Yeah,
Um,
classic.
yeah, it's so good. And then she goes back to eating. But every time I'm like,
You didn't expect this.
didn't expect it's like literally every time. But
Well, so coming back to the B-25 bomber, I want to open it up to you, Chris.
It's not the first time I've heard about that. And I guess there are several questions that I don't have answers for is you don't just crash a B-25 Mitchell into the Monongahela and not have it be all over the news and the papers and whatever else that's going on. And with that said, why would there be such secrecy on extracting it from the river? Because that would surely be a very big recovery operation because by the time it hits the bottom, it's going to be completely full of water. It's going to be substantially heavier and harder to extract than if you're just picking it up off the ground. So I'm not, especially in the dead of night, like I have questions about why. Like everybody in the whole city knows it's there. They watched it hit the water. I'd imagine if you go back and search the papers, it's probably in the day's news. So I don't understand why there would be any secrecy to removing it when everybody clearly knows what went in. And if it was any instruments in there, that would be one thing to recover that has secrecy surrounding it. But I mean, we know all about the B-29 that's sitting at the bottom of Lake Mead out in Utah, I think. And so I guess
Is
I'm
that Utah or
just
Nevada? But either way.
Nevada.
mhm.
I guess I'm just not sure why you would covertly remove it. But then again, I have no explanation of where it went at.
Right, that's
Assuming
the
the water's 20 feet deep, the airplane's say 16 feet from its belly to the root to the top of it.
mhm.
Ah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
like no, I think you're absolutely right, Chris, and that is like the crux of the conundrum here is that like we are very sure that the B-25 crashed into the river. Like that definitely happened. People saw it. That's like I said on the episode with Brendan, like that part definitely happened. So if a B-25 crashes into the river, there are two things that can happen. Either it's been pulled out or it hasn't. We can't find it and we should be able to find it. Therefore, it seems more likely that it has been recovered. But if it was recovered, which seems like the more likely of the two options, why the secrecy? And that's what fuels, I think, some of the conspiracy theories
Yeah,
around the possible cargo or any of the nefarious elements to it.
Well, and that's kind of what
agreed.
I said. Why the secrecy? I mean, you can keep a secret out in the open. And I think the scenario I gave was have a spokesperson from the army step in front of the mic and say, "We have removed the plane. It's no longer an issue to the local waterways,
I
and
mean, this was the 1950s. This was in an era, before concerns about nature really took hold.
This is before A Silent Spring by Rachel Carson.
Yeah, I mean,
100%.
it
Yep.
was, I tend to refer to this as the before safety was invented era.
Yeah.
well, and it's not just that, but it's also before a time where there's constant 24-hour cable news and of
Hmm.
course the omnipresence of the internet in our pockets where such a calamity as this would be news for months as opposed to a time measured better in minutes. So I had mentioned the shop that I teach at, the guy there and his parents were involved in the airport around here, and he has other relatives that are in that community. And I asked him about it, and right away he steps into the workroom in the back, and he pulls out, and I'll send the photo of it to you, Chris. I've already shared it with the Brendans, but he pulled out his dad had a framed image of the plane moments before hitting the water. Of course, it wasn't a real photo, although he told me it was. It was just a very good rendering of it. And I think it does well to present the scale of the plane to the river. But the really interesting thing, I think Bond, Brendan, and I walked away from that conversation kind of in agreement with one another that we don't know what was on that plane, but there was something important enough on that plane to warrant this sort of Cold War secrecy that lingers. And I'm curious as if you find that that's where you kind of feel about it, or if you feel that there's something more definitive or nefarious, Chris.
I guess I just don't know one way or the other. I mean, the one of the main arguments I heard for it still being there is that was again peak pre-safety and pre-environmental era where they were the conjecture is the river would have been so acidic it would have basically dissolved the aluminum, which that seems like even a bit of a stretch for the time. I mean, I wasn't there, but that seems like a pretty tall tale that the
It does.
Monongahela was that badly polluted that it could dissolve an airplane like an Alka-Seltzer.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, I think.
And I swear there was something in the past 10 years in the news about the group of people that are still trying to find it,
Well,
but I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah, there
And I
is.
mean, I don't know how deep the muck is or isn't on the bottom of the river. I guess I could believe either or. I mean, I'm suspicious that it was removed in secrecy, but I don't have any explanation for why it hasn't been found in a fairly small body of water
Well, I'll
when
say this.
we found the Titanic. We found a lot of other stuff that's hidden
It's
in way deeper water
it's a
than
good
20
point.
feet.
It's a good point.
Well, and I'll say this as far as to the removal at night. I'm not one of those people that says, well, enough people are saying it where there's smoke, there's fire. That's not necessarily true. But I could imagine a scenario. The first day they had a buoy. They were pretty certain of the location of the plane. You get divers come in, setting up rigging. You have to tow cables and whatnot. I'm not going to pretend I know, but setting all that stuff up so that the only thing left to do in the evening hours is the pooling of it. But so once all the rigging is up and everything, I would imagine that that's the hard work, and that could easily have taken place during the day and have been pooled at night. But that still doesn't answer the question of like, well, why the secrecy and everything. So, any final thoughts on that before I have something, and then we'll get into some radio.
No, I don't have anything else. It's just, I guess the short answer is I don't know.
So, in conclusion, the mystery continues.
Yes.
Yes, unfortunately. This is one of those mysteries though that you could imagine a world where either A, I mean, we're over the 50-year mark, so if it was anything that was actually top secret, it would have probably been declassified by now. Something could come out where it's like, oh, we removed it because it had A, B, or C on it,
Yeah.
much like the Kecksburg incident. Or you could have someone that's magnet fishing off of the Homestead High Level Bridge, and lo and behold, there's the plane. That could still happen.
So, on the subject of declassification and A, B, and C on it, we were talking about an FOIA. Brendan and I are actually talking about, well, why couldn't we put out a Freedom of Information Act because so
Mm-hmm.
much time has passed? Kecksburg was declassified
Mm-hmm.
about 10 years ago or something. So, but yeah, we'll leave the B-25 there because I don't think we're going to definitively solve it right now. But we are looking to put in the Freedom of Information Act. I think that we are able to do so, and we'll see if anything comes of it. But if not now, when really?
Right.
All right, ad read time. In many cultures, along with age, grades, and academic credentials, ear hair is a common sign of wisdom. People see it, they respect it, they want it. And when they want it, they want you. A life without thick hair can be detrimental not only to your self-confidence, but to your social and, by extension, physical well-being. Sadly, too many, due to diet and the constant presence of RF and other forms of non-ionizing radiation, struggle to maintain their otherwise naturally rich earlocks. You might think the quest to regain your dignity is lost, but tomorrow is here today thanks to breakthrough work being done at the Reklama Bormishus Laboratories in Odense, the birthplace of Hans Christian Andersen and named for Odin. They have hypothetically lab-proven results, stunning ear hair, where and when you need it the most, including in the bedroom. Remember, where there's hair, there's hope. Use our code VERBUNGREKNACHLUGEN for a limited time 300 free spin parlay. So earlier today, and I just want to say this real quick because it vaguely ties into radio and listening to things. I have
Mm-hmm.
taken up trying to do what Henry Rollins referred to as cardio listening, where during the week he claimed, or at least that time in his life, he was listening to only things that weren't really familiar to him. And then
Mm-hmm.
on the weekend, he would do like carbohydrate listening, where he would listen to the stuff that he grew up listening to.
Right.
And I think it's a good way. So the
I like that.
mountain goats were always like a group I've been aware of and heard some things, but I reached out to one of my supervisors because I'm like, hey, I'm running reports for next week. What's a mountain goats album that would pair well with that activity? So I was listening to Mountain Goats Tallahassee, and that was
Mm-hmm.
okay. But then I thought of something. I'm like, oh, YouTube does closed captions.
Mm-hmm.
What is like and I was thinking of like the carbohydrate listening. I was like, I'm going to go back to Rancid's 1998 Life Won't Wait
Mm-hmm.
and
Classic.
see how YouTube handles Tim Armstrong's vocal delivery, and it's
Wow.
hilarious. It is
Wow.
it is ridiculous, as the children said
As the
in
kids say.
1998. So,
Wow.
if you've ever listened to garbled lyrics and loved them, but never
Yeah.
quite sure what they meant, YouTube's closed caption is not going to help you at
It's
all,
not
but it
helpful.
will be fun. It
Yeah.
will be fun.
Uh,
So you reached out and you said, "Hey, can we talk about radios tonight?" And I
right.
said, "Well, why not?"
Yeah.
And I think you were especially excited because Chris is on as well. And
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
because like Chris, I always think of you as someone who has just a good technical mind for things of this nature. When because I had something happen this morning that like kind of like kicked all this off, and once I started thinking about looking into it, I'm like, we need to just talk about this. So here we are. So what happened this morning was, long story short, I was at the gym. And I normally don't listen to music whenever I'm working out in the morning. I typically listen to I listen to audiobooks if I listen to anything. If I do listen to music, it's usually like very chill music, not like high intensity stuff. But for some reason this morning, I was compelled to listen to a relatively old album that was pretty intense. And just because I was like, it's a Friday, we'll see what happens. So I listened to it. And when I'm leaving the gym in the morning, I live in a college town and I always have the college radio station on when I'm driving around town, just because it makes me feel connected. Now, granted, at 6:30 in the morning, there's not someone actually, there's like a DJ on. It's just like whatever their random, song generator basically is going. But still, it's nice to get, like you said, Nick, sometimes it's just nice to listen to stuff you don't normally listen to because it makes you, just keep
yeah,
branching out.
you find some cool stuff that
Yeah, you
way.
never know. So I'm driving home in the morning and everything, and two strange things kind of happened. The album I was listening to was from the band Mineral. Are you guys familiar with Mineral at all?
I am not.
That's understandable. They're not very popular. They were a relatively well-known emo band back in like the late 90s from like
Yeah, that was not anything I really ever got to.
right.
I loved Rites of Spring,
Yeah, which
and
is
that
great
was about
too.
it.
Yeah, but
I'll Get Up Kids. Yeah,
yeah, Get Up Kids too. Yeah, well, they're from the same ilk. I'm driving through town and a Mineral song comes on in between like Bruno Mars and like Pearl Jam. Like it's like very, very popular stuff. And this is like, again, not like the most obscure thing in the world, but it was enough that like I would have never expected to hear that song.
Yeah, that's the thing that only college radio can bring.
Right, yeah, which is cool. But so it was enough that it like caught my attention. Like, oh my God, they're playing 5 8 10. That's just crazy. And I like, what are the odds that's the same day I'm listening to it? And I felt compelled to listen to it. So it caught my attention and everything. And then something weird happened. I listen to the radio a lot. I have two radios in this house that are almost always on. I've just always been a big radio guy. I've never heard the type of interference that I then heard once like my attention was pulled to the radio. For those of you that do listen to terrestrial radio, you're probably used to the idea of when you're driving somewhere, hearing like one station going out and another one kind of coming in, like interceding onto it sometimes, where things get kind of get kind of garbled. This almost sounded like it was a modulation in the sound. It almost sounded like a phaser or a wah or like a tape delay almost. It really kind of jarred me because again listened to radio for my whole life basically. I've never heard the type of interference that I heard.
And this
Not
is on
saying,
the local college station still?
yeah, on the local college station. So and it just lasted for maybe like 3 or 4 seconds, like not very long. And again, not saying it was paranormal, but it was two very strange things back to back. And it kind of put me in a very weird mood. I was just like, what in the world? Like, what in the world is happening? Um, because it's not often you encounter a new type of interference for terrestrial radio. Like, I didn't think there was any other options out there, you know. Um, so that was just weird. And I was like, you know what? Radios are strange. What's the deal with radio? Kind of like a Jerry Seinfeld joke. So my first question, before I get into some of the stuff I was thinking about and looking into, have you guys ever had any weird radio experiences like that, where you heard like interference that you weren't familiar with, or had a weird synchronicity?
I feel like I spent most of my childhood hoping I would. It never happened. I mean,
Oh,
I
really?
remember
Yeah.
watching a Pete and Pete episode when I was a kid and then just becoming obsessed with the idea of pirate radio.
Right.
But I mean, that obviously never went anywhere.
Hmm.
Yeah, we never got Wart Radio off the ground. I do remember you and I, though, we each had handheld CBs because we grew up living on the same block. And
Hmm.
so whenever there was snow, Chris and I would wake up and get on CBs. I remember I also ate a lot of nachos at that period of time. I don't know why that's important to know, but it is.
Boy, was life good.
I will say
Sure was.
life was pretty sweet. I will say this. I spent most of my childhood listening, oscillating between the FM and the AM, but
Hmm.
I've always gravitated more to AM because it was just always a little weirder because that's where talk radio was. And I know Chris has the story, so you can swap me. Listening to talk radio and always just enjoying conversation, but that's where there was always like more of a chance of something stranger happening conversationally.
Right.
And I learned about the physics of radio a little bit. Like stations come in better at night, the ionosphere's down, and learning about de-Xing kind of in the natural way of word of mouth and through books. And then when I got my first shortwave radio, I remember that experience. The one of the small things is like when you're listening to AM or shortwave amplitude modulation, if there was a storm nearby, a thunderstorm, you can track lightning by the interference that it presents. You
Right.
also learn about like how transformers in your neighborhood can affect your signal. And I'll say one quick story, and I'll give it over to Chris because I know he's got something, and I'm gonna make him tell the Roma story. But I remember being at my friend Clint's house, and he had a room in an attic, and it was evening in autumn, and we were playing guitar through his really terrible amp, through his house's old knob and tube wiring, and we unplugged the guitar, but the amp was still on, and we started hearing like French radio coming from like Quebec or more likely Southern Ontario, somewhere where there's a French speaking station. And we both looked at each other like we were in the Amityville horror because we had no idea what was going on. That was a very weird experience, which I understand much better now
Right.
as being just like a normal thing. But my goodness, that freaked me out. Have heard like really weird things like it almost sounds like a satellite, but it's like a
Right.
pulsing.
Hmm.
Interestingly, when you go on the shortwave, sometimes you'll find stations, and that seems to be all it is. What were you going to say, Chris? I think you came off mute there for a second.
I,
I remember you telling the story of these stories are related. There was a personality on KDKA, and he was doing like a meet and greet at some store.
Oh, yeah, it was the late Mike Pintek that used to be on KDKA.
Yeah, he's the
I
guy that
used
broke
to,
3 Mile.
yeah, I used to, when I worked in Pittsburgh, I listened to his show. I remember met up with him at like a car cruise in on a Friday night, and I was like, "Oh, hey, Mike, how are you? I listen to your show all the time." And he just kind of looked at me like wasn't sure if I was like being sarcastic or genuine. I think he was polite, but I think he was just more taken aback that somebody under the age of 50 was listening to his show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you were still like a teenager at the time, maybe
I've been
20.
early 20s at that point.
I remember being in college and I was having lunch or dinner with a couple guys from the hockey team. And there was this young lady, we were all young, but there was this young lady who was friends with one of the guys on the team. And we were talking, and she told me her last name, which I'll say because, her last name was Rasmussen. I'm like, oh, like the guy on KDK radio. And she goes, that's my dad. No one under 60 listens to my dad on the radio. And I said, oh, no, I listen to him all the time. And then I was mentioning like stories. So, yeah, we were always very tuned into the AM. And I still am, but, local talk is not what it was. And I know you and I have lamented that.
No, and I no longer work near the city, so I don't hear any of it. But I used to enjoy, you or I would write in and argue with the host about something, and then I'd immediately get a text message or whatever, like, "Oh, I heard him read your comment on the radio." But yeah,
That was
I used to
awesome.
write into the various hosts on the talk shows and argue with them.
It's still fun.
Oh, it's still fun, yeah. And I just think that radio has like that interactive quality to it. And how we interface with it, you know?
Yeah,
I think the magical thing is, unlike this, where we can see each other, and this is great. This is
Hmm.
phenomenal. This is the shoe phone times 10 that we always dreamed of. But I think there is something magical about hearing. It's kind of voyeuristic and kind of you're hearing a conversation.
Hmm.
There's a beauty in like having to tune in. Yeah,
there's
I still love radio.
there's something lost in not everything being at your fingertips at once. Like when we were young, we'd have to sit there and listen alphabetically to the radio, go through the school closings and delays, and they'd always go to break right before they'd get to your school's alphabetical letter. But now, like, I'll be laying in bed and I'll get a text message from my kid's school that, oh, it's a 2 hour delay.
Right.
Like there's no waking up and putting on the TV or the radio and just watching the little ticker at the bottom or
Hmm.
listen to them call it out on the radio. And I don't know. I feel like there's something nostalgic about that.
Well, I think more than nostalgia, because I think nostalgia can be a lie a lot of the time. Although it's understandable as you get older. But I think you said it earlier when you have everything at your fingertips, that kind of erodes desire. Like
Mm.
I talked about checking out and listening to entire albums today.
Hmm.
And I know it makes us all sound old as all get out to be like, well, you had to find that back in the day. And who knew you had to wait 2 to 3 weeks for the mail order to return and everything. But while it's exciting for me still to be able to listen to stuff, it really is wild to me that I'll see a name of an artist and I won't immediately click on it, even though I now have access to something that I thought about a lot or was always curious, like, well,
Hmm.
I've seen that name. What do they sound like? I think when everything is available to you, it erodes your desire or it perverts your desire. I think people have talked a lot about, well, why did really rich, powerful people do terrible, immoral things? And I think that also might have something to do with it, which is very different conversation
Yeah,
than
it's a
bizarre.
yeah,
Uh,
it's one we could go on about all night, I'm sure, but it's definitely a very different one.
yes.
I mean,
But
it used to be the marker that you were rich back in the early 90s was you had a 60-inch television and
mhm.
an expensive car, but now everybody has a 60-inch television.
That's true. That's true. And I think
And
that
even
like
cheap cars are expensive.
Yeah,
They are.
don't get me started. I'm trying to replace my car and I'm finding it to be a very expensive endeavor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ugh.
But I think it's interesting. Like you guys are getting with like the nostalgia and the kind of like how ubiquitous radios have been throughout, the last 100 years. I've been trying to think about like what that has to do with its place in the paranormal. And so after when I was thinking about this morning, I was thinking about like where radio started. Have you guys ever actually been to the Westinghouse building where KDK did their
No.
first? It's a really cool spot. Nowadays it's basically like an event space. I've been there for a few parties, which is kind of weird. And I always thought the place was kind of spooky. So I looked it up and wanted to see if it was haunted. And I didn't find anything about it being haunted, but I did find something about the KDKA TV center being haunted down at One Gateway Center down in Pittsburgh, which I thought was interesting. So I'm just going to read a quick blurb from one of my favorite books, uh, The National Directory of Haunted Places from 1994.
Let your fingers do the walking.
Right. It's one of my favorite just like big reference books of spooky things. And I love when I find things in here that are relevant to what I'm like actively researching. But so this is TV, but same idea. Uh, so this says the modern television studio is haunted by the ghost of its former facilities director, Julian Drob. He died in May of 1963 of a sudden heart attack at the age of 50. He apparently left behind a lot of unfinished projects because his presence lingered on to help those who took over his work. Late at night, the lights would go out in his old office, and two porters witnessed papers turning over one by one on top of his desk. Others felt his perfectionistic spirit guiding them on the daily operations of the station. Exorcism ceremonies were held to put his spirit at rest, but the next morning, black candles were found burning in his office. Nobody could explain where they came from. Some suggested that the helpful ghost was assisting in his own exorcism.
How credible is that? Have you been able to corroborate some of the claims
So,
made in the
so, so what I was able to find was one, Julian Drob was a facilities director at KDK. He definitely died in 1963, found his obituary and everything. I found multiple references of this place being haunted over the years. Um, so much so that even the KDK morning show a few years ago did a ghost investigation on air for one of
I
the morning
listened to
shows.
that. I think that was with
Yeah,
Mike Signa.
I believe it was. Yeah, yep.
Nailed it.
So, like, at least it's one of the things where at least they think it's haunted, which is interesting because, like, when we think about the radio and the paranormal, I don't typically think of haunted radio stations. Like, I don't think about the location of where the signal is emanating from being the place that's haunted. So I thought
Well,
that was interesting.
let me challenge you on a couple
Mhm.
things there because one of the things that I've always been critical of and have poked a bit of fun at is the idea of spirit boxes. Chris, are you familiar with this concept?
I'm not.
Okay. Uh, Brendan, would you like to give
So,
Chris a rundown
yeah,
of what a
so
spirit box claims to do, what it does and what it claims to do?
yes. So funny enough, you should bring this up, Nick, because I spent about 45 minutes on the phone with my good friend who's a ghost investigator before this call talking about spirit boxes. Because I was like, we're going to talk about spirit boxes tonight if there's one thing I'm sure about in this world. So, Chris, what a spirit box is, there's a few different versions, but the most basic version of a spirit box is a radio, just a AM FM radio. And what it does is it has a some sort of an automated control on it where it cycles through the stations at a very quick rate. And that rate is sometimes variable, basically what it's supposed to be doing is it's creating, in theory, some sort of a platform or a vessel for spirits to communicate with investigators.
And so basically all it does is it flutters through the radio dial super
Hmm.
quickly. And so you get little smatterings of words and whatnot. And my criticism is they will get like EVPs and they will claim to hear things, but I think it's just our pattern, our natural pattern seeking behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of suspicious of that. I feel like you flip through the radio fast enough, probably end up with all sorts of weird things that are unintentional.
Yeah, what's the
No,
old joke? Like, oh, I found a message in my soup.
right.
It says ooh,
And
and
it's
they come over to like those are SpaghettiOs, sir.
SpaghettiOs.
So I
Um,
was just reading some of the notes on the guys who about 5 years ago broke the Zodiac Killer's 340 character cipher that went unsolved for about 50 years.
I watched that just last night. They created those three guys. They created the programs and
Hmm. But
everything.
but it was interesting
I
seeing
watched that just last night.
their failed attempts that did create some words and created things that were sort of kind of there, but in the end weren't actually part of the final puzzle. So it was just
Hmm.
things that didn't line up that just happened to make human readable ish things. So that's kind of what I'd be afraid of kind of at this level is you make enough radio noise at some point something's going to sound intelligible.
You put it very well by drawing that comparison, and I had not thought about it in those ways, but your statement about the Zodiac encryptions reminds me of like the Bible code. Are you familiar with
Yeah,
the Bible
the Da
code?
Vinci Code, or not
There's a
the Da
lot,
Vinci Code.
yeah.
Well, they say there's
Yeah, there's,
prophecies and whatnot,
and the
but
whole thing in the Bible's kind of ridiculous with how many different times it's been translated. And
that's another thing.
It's yeah, it's I have a lot of
But
problems with that. Yeah.
the some of the critics of the people claiming that, well, if you do these same sort of algorithms with the Bible translation, you know, you get these prophecies. I agree with you, Chris. It's just like the white noise that's generated with those encryptions that could lead you down a false avenue because some of the critics did the same thing with Moby Dick. And they're like,
Yeah,
well, look at what the book Moby Dick. Certainly Herman Melville was on another plane.
right.
And my other criticism of it is how is it really giving a platform when their radio waves are energy and radio waves are around us all the time? Is the
Hmm.
radio this thing generating? I mean, I guess it has batteries, but
So yeah, so there's two things I want to say with that. So one, I brought up that same thing, and my friend was very clear. Like she's like, we don't know what's happening. Like there's nothing definitive about this. This is all kind of like, she definitely takes a very skeptical approach to the spirit boxes. But the thing that I thought was interesting is she said that some people who use these spirit boxes will use them at a very slow rate so that you can actually like you hear little like snips of like actual like radio broadcasts like coming through. And she said she doesn't find those to be typically very either useful or credible during a investigation, in her opinion.
now pause. I agree with her on that because I think that only leads to the point Chris was making more directly. But
Hmm.
also my other criticism, I appreciate her skeptical and being honest with like we don't really know.
Hmm.
But part of the problem is if you don't have predictive capabilities, if you're not able to replicate things,
Hmm.
if you're just kind of smacking something in it and then seeing what it does, like what I don't understand the value in that. Chris, what were you
yeah,
going to say?
that's kind of how I feel about it. I feel I'd look at it a lot more credible if you're basically walking around with an antenna of some flavor, and I don't know how possible this is. I'm certainly no expert that, and a spectrum analyzer to look at what's in the area that's being transmitted towards you.
Hmm.
As I mean, in the society we live now, we're just absolutely bombarded with everything with
Right.
signals. I mean, that's why AM's so borderline useless now, is there's just so
Hmm.
much noise in the
Other junk.
air.
Right.
I mean, whether it's Wi-Fi, I think like
Bluetooth.
my the water meter on my house is wireless
Yeah.
for them to get their readings. Like it's insane the amount of signals we are surrounded with every day.
Absolutely. And I think that that's why when I was speaking with her, she brought up that like there's these simple ones that, just kind of give you the clips of what's going on the radio. She thought the ones that were much more useful from a spirit box standpoint was she has this one that actually has two channels that are picking that are so it's basically two radios, and you can set it up so that they are going on different rates, have different like interval ratios, and are also going in different directions up and down the frequency spectrums. And she said with those ones, it's moving. There's so much happening. It's moving so quickly. It's technically two radios, but it seems much more like almost like a white noise machine at that point. And it sounded like, from her experience, when you get what she thinks could be like EVPs or voices that show up on those ones, it's not like you're like, oh, here's a bunch of words and here's one that like seems relevant. It's much less likely to be pareidolia whenever there is so little actual vocal tones coming through and things like that.
Well, and I'm not trying to get down on your friend at all. I think they're presenting it very honestly. I just still see my remaining question in that situation remains why does it need to shuffle through the radio spectrum at
Oh, it
all?
doesn't. It doesn't. And that's no,
And
and
why
that's
couldn't you just have a white noise machine and record in a room with a white noise machine
right.
if
No,
it
you
needs to generate audible sound?
right. No, you absolutely could. And again, that's something that I know I'm literally speaking for her right now. So I apologize. um,
Well,
but
she can come on. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
do genuinely want to know, but neither here nor there.
But yeah, that's something me and her actually were speaking about, is like you don't even need, like, it doesn't necessarily matter what the medium is. It's that there's something there that can aid, that is an external device. I think her and a lot of people she works with are much more in line with like using your other senses, and there being a lot of things going on, not just like, oh, here's one piece. Like, I don't think she's looking at a ghost box as a data point like some people are. But again, I don't want to speak for her, but uh,
No,
but
I would love to ask her about it because I know we've talked about like of all the typical modern day ghost hunting kits and
mhm,
devices, which do you see as being potentially more credible than others? And I
mhm,
think I said, I think an EMF thing is maybe potentially more credible provided that the person utilizing it has a better than layman's understanding of
mhm.
what the device is picking up. Because if I gave you an oscilloscope, you could
Some
generate some
people,
cool stuff, but do you really know it? Like, do you know the difference
yeah,
between like a square wave and a saw wave
saw
or
wave.
whatever?
No, absolutely. And I think that like that's why I've always thought that radios are like interesting in when it comes to ghost hunting, is because it's something that's been around and in like our cultural zeitgeist for so long. Because I think radios were one of, whenever especially we had transistor radios, it seems to be one of like the first things that like the everyman could get into from a technology standpoint. It was accessible for people early on.
I would say before transistor radios, which were the late 50s, when
Hmm.
those got really popular, I would say crystal sets. Are you
Even
familiar
crystal
with
sets.
crystal
Yeah.
sets?
Hmm.
Yeah, you don't even need electricity for a crystal set. Well, I guess that maybe you need a dry set. I can't remember. I haven't built a crystal set since I was a child, but
Right.
I would
Yeah.
say that linking radio and the spirit world is extremely logical for logical is a weird way of putting it, but it makes perfect sense to me because
Hmm.
wireless was really amazing. These are disembodied voices from far away. If and there were people that were thinking, connecting dots that were like, well, if we can transmit, if I can hear this person from tens, 20, 50, 60 miles away
Hmm.
beside me, how far could they go in another plane? And of course,
Right.
the earliest, like Marconi, DeForest, all these people are working and developing what was then known as wireless during, again, arguably the height of the spiritualist movement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of cross pollination.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's why it's always going to have a some sort of a hold in the paranormal, because it's there's something that is very naturally ethereal about picking up voices from the beyond.
When you said ethereal,
It is.
they thought the
Yeah.
waves floated through the ether.
Exactly. Exactly. So like so I think those things are very connected. So like I kind of started by saying like what's the like the problem with radios, you know? I think
That-
that it is something that's just very naturally kind of spooky.
And radio is one of the last remaining things that you don't need a digital encoder to
Mm-hmm.
demodulate. Like
Right.
it's just it is what it's what unencrypted just bare
Mm-hmm.
waves out going from a transmitter to your radio, and you can, obviously a radio in a car or whatever now is a
Mm-hmm.
complicated device with computers, but like you said, you like a crystal radio is still something you can just build from a kit now that will be
Mm-hmm.
a functional radio, and there won't be a single integrated circuit anywhere on it.
Right. And that's kind of what I was saying from like a paranormal standpoint when it comes to these things. Like you mentioned earlier, Nick, like what's actually kind of happening here, like we don't know. Is are ghosts in theory when people use these devices, or like even like what happened to me this morning? Like are ghosts manipulating existing radio waves, or are they are they transmitting radio waves? Like what's going on here? Personally, I think with a lot of these like times where there could be paranormal things happening, I don't necessarily think the medium matters as much. I think if something wants to get across or something wants to happen, it's going to happen. I think there are things that might be easier or more convenient from an energetic standpoint, but I think that radios in general are just kind of a spooky thing.
So turn your radio on, as the song goes.
So yeah, if you out there have ever had a spooky radio happening, we would love to hear about it. So if you want to reach out to us, you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, or you can send us an email at theghostfurnacepodcast@gmail.com. Again, we want to thank Chris for joining us tonight. Hopefully, second of many.